Muslim man harassed by racist cop, then a well-known advocate steps in to help. How will this story escalate? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. Ahmed adjusted the strap of his bag as he made his way down the bustling city street, the late afternoon sun casting a golden glow over the rows of shops and cafes. It was Friday, and the peaceful calm of the mosque still lingered in his mind as he thought about the weekend ahead. He had just finished prayers and was looking forward to meeting his family for dinner at a nearby restaurant. His younger sister had been excited to share some news, and Ahmed couldn't help but smile at the thought of her animated expressions as she spoke. As he crossed the street, he noticed a police car parked near the curb, its lights off but engine idling. Ahmed barely gave it a second thought, until he heard a sharp voice call out behind him. "Hey you! Stop right there." Ahmed froze, his heart skipping a beat. He turned to see a police officer striding toward him, his expression stern and unyielding. The officer's uniform was crisp, his badge gleaming under the sunlight, but it was the look in his eyes that sent a chill down Ahmed's spine. It wasn't the look of someone seeking information, it was the look of someone making an assumption. "Yes, officer?" Ahmed said calmly, keeping his hands visible as the man approached. "What's in the bag?" the officer demanded, his tone laced with suspicion. Ahmed blinked, momentarily taken aback. "Just some personal items," he replied. "Why do you ask?" The officer, whose name tag read Barnes, stepped closer, his hand resting on the holster of his weapon. "Mind if I take a look? You seem a little too nervous for someone just walking around." Ahmed frowned, his confusion mingling with a growing sense of unease. "I'm not nervous," he said evenly. "But I'd like to know why you're stopping me." Barnes smirked, his gaze sweeping over Ahmed's traditional kurta and the neatly wrapped turban on his head. "Just routine," he said. "You fit a description." Ahmed's stomach sank. He had heard those words before from friends and acquaintances who had faced similar encounters. It was the universal excuse for unwarranted harassment, a vague, unprovable claim designed to justify prejudice. "Description of what?" Ahmed asked, his voice steady despite the tension building in his chest. The officer's smirk faltered, replaced by a harder edge. "Don't get smart with me," Barnes snapped. "Just open the bag." By now, a few passers-by had paused to watch the scene unfold. Ahmed felt the weight of their stares, some curious, others pitying. He could feel the humiliation creeping in, but he refused to let it show. "Officer, with all due respect," Ahmed said, choosing his words carefully, "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just trying to go about my day." "Funny," Barnes said, crossing his arms. "People who have nothing to hide usually cooperate." Ahmed sighed, knowing that arguing would only make things worse. Reluctantly, he set his bag on the ground and unzipped it, revealing a few books, a water bottle, and a neatly folded jacket. Barnes crouched down, rifling through the contents with exaggerated scrutiny. Barnes muttered, pulling out one of the books and flipping through its pages. "What's this about?" Ahmed glanced at the cover, his patience wearing thin. "It's a novel," he said. "You're welcome to read it if you want." Barnes ignored the comment, dropping the book back into the bag with a dismissive thud. "What about your ID? Let's see it." Ahmed pulled out his wallet and handed over his driver's license, watching as Barnes scrutinized it as if it might reveal some hidden secret. "You're local?" Barnes asked, his tone skeptical. "Yes," Ahmed replied. "I've lived here my whole life." "Aha," Barnes said, handing the ID back with a smirk. "Well, you don't look like it." The comment hit like a slap, but Ahmed forced himself to remain calm. "What exactly does that mean?" he asked, his voice level. Barnes shrugged, a smug grin spreading across his face. "You tell me?" The crowd around them had grown, and Ahmed could hear murmurs of disapproval from a few of the onlookers. One woman stepped forward, her expression a mix of anger and concern. "Officer, is this really necessary?" she asked. "He hasn't done anything wrong." Barnes shot her a glare. "Ma'am, I suggest you stay out of this. It's official police business." The woman didn't back down. "It looks more like harassment to me," she said. "Why are you treating him like a criminal?" Barnes's jaw tightened, and he turned his attention back to Ahmed. "You're free to go," he said abruptly, his tone dismissive. "But don't think I won't be keeping an eye on you." Ahmed nodded, his dignity bruised but intact. He picked up his bag, thanked the woman quietly, and began to walk away. But before he could take more than a few steps, Barnes called out again. "Wait a minute." Ahmed turned, his patience finally fraying. "Yes, officer?" Barnes gestured toward him with a sharp motion. "Don't think this is over." You people always think you can get away with anything. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Ahmed clenched his fists, his calm exterior threatening to crack. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say a word, a new voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me, Officer Barnes," the voice said, clear and authoritative. "What exactly do you mean by you people?" The crowd parted as a woman stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. She was dressed in a tailored blazer, her sharp eyes fixed on Barnes with unwavering intensity. Ahmed recognized her immediately. Maya Richardson, a prominent civil rights advocate whose work had made headlines across the country. Barnes's confidence wavered for the first time. "This doesn't concern you, ma'am," he said, his tone defensive. "Oh, but it does," Maya said, her voice steady and unyielding. "When I see a public servant abusing their power to target someone based on their appearance, it absolutely concerns me." Barnes straightened, trying to regain his composure. "I'm just doing my job," he said. Maya arched an eyebrow. "Is that so? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're harassing an innocent man without cause. Care to explain?" The crowd murmured in agreement, their support emboldening Maya as she stepped closer to Ahmed. "Are you all right?" she asked him gently. Ahmed nodded, his gratitude evident in his expression. "I'm fine," he said. "Thank you for stepping in." Maya turned back to Barnes, her gaze unwavering. "If you're doing your job, Officer Barnes, then you shouldn't have any problem sharing your reasoning for stopping this man." Barnes's face reddened and he shifted uncomfortably. "He was acting suspiciously," he said, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "And what exactly was suspicious about him?" Maya pressed. "Walking down the street? Carrying a bag? Or is it simply the fact that he doesn't fit your narrow definition of who belongs here?" Barnes opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The crowd was silent, all eyes on him as Maya's words hung in the air. Ahmed watched the exchange, his initial surprise giving way to a sense of hope. For the first time since the encounter had begun, he felt like someone was truly standing up for him, refusing to let Barnes's prejudice go unchecked. As the tension reached its peak, Maya took a step closer to Barnes, her voice soft but firm. "You swore an oath to protect and serve," she said. "That includes everyone regardless of their background, their appearance, or their faith. If you can't uphold that oath, then perhaps you're in the wrong line of work." The crowd erupted into applause, their support for Maya clear. Barnes's face was a mix of anger and embarrassment, and he looked around as if searching for an escape. "I'll be filing a formal complaint about this incident," Maya added. "And I'll make sure it's reviewed at the highest level." Barnes said nothing, his confidence shattered. With a final glance at Ahmed, he turned and walked away, his departure met with cheers from the crowd. As Officer Barnes disappeared into the crowd, the tension in the air slowly dissipated, replaced by a collective sense of relief and admiration for Maya's intervention. Ahmed let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his hands still trembling slightly as he clutched the strap of his bag. Maya turned to him, her expression softening as she assessed his condition. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked, her voice calm but full of concern. Ahmed nodded, though the adrenaline coursing through his veins made it hard to speak. "Yes, I'm fine," he managed. "Thank you for stepping in. I didn't know what else to do." "You shouldn't have had to do anything," Maya said firmly. "This never should have happened to you in the first place." The crowd, still gathered nearby, began to murmur in agreement. A few people approached Ahmed, offering words of support and indignation over what they had just witnessed. "That cop had no right to treat you like that," an older man said, his brow furrowed with anger. "You handled it better than I would have." A young woman with a stroller added, "You're so brave for staying calm. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Ahmed felt a swell of gratitude for their kindness, but it was Maya's unwavering presence that gave him the most comfort. She wasn't just standing up for him, she was taking control of a situation that could have spiraled even further out of hand. "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" Maya asked, her voice cutting through the chatter of the crowd. Ahmed hesitated, unsure how to answer. He had been on his way to meet his family, but the encounter with Barnes had shaken him more than he cared to admit. The thought of facing his parents and siblings with the weight of what had just happened felt overwhelming. "I was supposed to meet my family for dinner," he said finally. "But I think I need a moment to gather myself." Maya nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Why don't we step over here for a moment?" she suggested, gesturing toward a quiet corner of the plaza. "We can talk and you can take a breather." Ahmed agreed, following her to a nearby bench. The crowd began to disperse, though a few people lingered, watching from a distance as if to ensure that Ahmed was truly all right. Once they were seated, Maya turned to him, her expression both compassionate and determined. "Ahmed, I want you to know that what happened to you was wrong, on every level. And it's not something we can just let go." Ahmed sighed, running a hand over his face. "I've heard stories about things like this happening, but experiencing it myself, it's different. I didn't do anything wrong, but he treated me like a criminal. Because of his own prejudice," Maya said. "People like Barnes abuse their power and they count on the fact that most people won't push back. But you don't have to face this alone. I'm here to help." Ahmed looked at her, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "What can we do?" "He's just going to say he was doing his job." Maya's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's the excuse they always use. But we're not going to let him hide behind it. I have contacts at the local police department, and I'm going to make sure this incident is thoroughly investigated." Ahmed hesitated. "I don't know if I want to make a big deal out of it. What if it just makes things worse?" Maya placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "I understand your concern, and I'll never pressure you to do something you're not comfortable with. But speaking up can make a difference, not just for you but for others who might face the same treatment." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a man in plain clothes, a police badge clipped to his belt. He approached cautiously, his hands visible and his expression neutral. "Excuse me," the man said, addressing Maya and Ahmed. "I'm Lieutenant Harris. I heard about the incident with Officer Barnes, and I wanted to check in personally." Maya's eyes narrowed slightly, her protective instincts kicking in. "And what exactly do you plan to do about it, Lieutenant?" Harris held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm here to listen," he said. "I understand that Officer Barnes may have acted inappropriately, and I want to assure you that we take these matters seriously." Maya's expression remained guarded. "Taking it seriously means more than just words. What steps are you actually planning to take?" Harris nodded, seeming to recognize the weight of her words. "I'll be reviewing the body camera footage from the incident and speaking with Barnes directly. If there's evidence of misconduct, we'll take appropriate action." "Appropriate action," Maya repeated, her tone skeptical. "And what does that mean exactly? A slap on the wrist? A few days of suspension?" Harris hesitated, clearly aware that Maya wouldn't be easily appeased. "If the evidence supports it, Barnes could face disciplinary measures, up to and including termination." Ahmed, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. "And what about me?" he asked, his voice steady despite the lingering tremor in his hands. "He humiliated me in front of all those people. Does that just get swept under the rug?" Harris met his gaze, his expression somber. "I'm truly sorry for what you went through, Mr. Ahmed. You have the right to file a formal complaint, and if you choose to do so, I'll personally make sure it's taken seriously." After the lieutenant left, Maya turned back to Ahmed. "That's a start," she said. "But we're not stopping there. What else can we do?" Ahmed asked, a note of cautious optimism in his voice. Maya's eyes lit up with determination. "We make your story heard. The more people know about what happened, the harder it will be for them to sweep it under the rug. I'll help you write a statement, and we can share it with local advocacy groups and the media." Ahmed hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had always preferred to keep a low profile, but the thought of staying silent felt like letting Barnes win. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's do it." Over the next few days, Ahmed and Maya worked together to craft his statement. Ahmed recounted every detail of the encounter, from Barnes's initial stop to the demeaning comments and the public humiliation. Maya helped him refine the language, ensuring that his words were clear and impactful without losing the raw emotion behind them. When the statement was ready, Maya shared it with her network of advocates and journalists. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, Ahmed's story began circulating online, sparking outrage and calls for accountability. Social media was flooded with messages of support, as well as demands for Barnes to face consequences. Local news outlets picked up the story, and soon Ahmed was being asked to share his experience in interviews. Though nervous at first, he found strength in the knowledge that his voice was making a difference. Each time he told his story, he felt a little more empowered, a little less burdened by the weight of the encounter. The public pressure quickly reached a boiling point. The police department announced that Barnes had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation, and Lieutenant Harris publicly apologized on behalf of the department. It wasn't the full resolution Ahmed and Maya were hoping for, but it was a step in the right direction. Meanwhile, Maya organized a community forum to address issues of racial profiling and police misconduct. The event drew a diverse crowd, including activists, local leaders, and ordinary citizens who wanted to be part of the solution. Ahmed was invited to speak, and though his nerves threatened to get the better of him, Maya's encouragement gave him the confidence to take the stage. "Standing here today, I feel a mix of emotions," Ahmed began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "What happened to me was painful and humiliating, but it also reminded me of the strength we have when we stand together. I'm grateful to everyone who has supported me, and I hope that by sharing my story, we can create a future where no one has to go through what I did." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers a testament to the impact Ahmed's words had made. As he stepped down from the stage, Maya met him with a proud smile. "You were incredible," she said. "This is just the beginning." The days following the community forum marked a shift, not just for Ahmed but for the entire city. His story had become a rallying point, sparking conversations about racial profiling and police accountability that had long been ignored. Local advocacy groups joined forces, organizing marches and petitions calling for systemic reform within the police department. What had started as one man's painful encounter was now becoming a movement. Ahmed, though still adjusting to his newfound role as an advocate, found himself stepping into the spotlight with growing confidence. Maya had been by his side every step of the way, coaching him on how to handle interviews, connect with supporters, and stay grounded amidst the whirlwind of attention. One afternoon, Maya invited Ahmed to her office to discuss the next steps. The space was warm and inviting, filled with books, photos, and mementos from her years of activism. Ahmed sat across from her, his hands clasped together as she outlined their plan. "We're making progress," Maya said, her tone both encouraging and determined. "But progress isn't enough. We need to turn this momentum into real, tangible change." Ahmed nodded, his resolve hardening. "What can I do to help?" "For starters, we need to keep the pressure on the police department," Maya said. "That means organizing more community events, meeting with local leaders, and making sure your voice, and the voices of others like you, are heard loud and clear." Ahmed hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Do you think they'll actually listen? Or will they just wait for the attention to die down and go back to business as usual?" Maya's expression softened. "That's always the risk," she admitted. "But that's why we can't let up. Change takes time and it takes persistence. The fact that you're willing to stand up and fight for what's right, that's what makes all the difference." The next event was a town hall meeting, held in a large community center near the heart of the city. The room was packed, with standing room only as residents gathered to voice their concerns and demand answers from city officials. Ahmed sat near the front, flanked by Maya and several other advocates who had become key allies in their fight. The mayor, the chief of police, and several city council members were seated on the stage, their expressions ranging from attentive to defensive. When the floor was opened for public comments, the floodgates burst. Residents shared stories of their own encounters with racial profiling, their voices trembling with a mix of anger and pain. Parents spoke of their fears for their children, while activists outlined proposals for reform. When it was Ahmed's turn to speak, the room fell silent. He stood, taking a deep breath as he faced the crowd. "My name is Ahmed," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "A few weeks ago, I was stopped and harassed by a police officer for no reason other than the way I look. That experience was humiliating, but it was also eye-opening. It made me realize how many others have faced the same injustice, and how easy it is for those in power to turn a blind eye." He paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. "But I also realized something else. We're not powerless. When we come together, when we speak out, we can create change. And that's why I'm here today, to stand with all of you and demand accountability, not just for me, but for everyone who has ever been treated unfairly." The room erupted into applause, and Ahmed felt a surge of pride and determination. As he sat back down, Maya leaned over and whispered, "You're a natural. They're listening." The momentum continued to build. The town hall meeting was covered extensively by local media, and Ahmed's speech was shared widely on social media, garnering thousands of views and comments. People from all over the country reached out to express their support, sharing their own stories of discrimination and thanking Ahmed for his courage. But not everyone was supportive. As Ahmed's profile grew, so did the backlash. Online trolls flooded his social media accounts with hateful messages, questioning his motives and spreading false narratives about the incident. The negativity was overwhelming at times, but Ahmed refused to let it deter him. Maya was a constant source of strength, reminding him that the backlash was a sign that their efforts were having an impact. "When people push back, it's because they're afraid of losing their power," she told him. "Don't let their fear silence your voice. Meanwhile, the police department's internal investigation into Officer Barnes was making slow but steady progress. The body camera footage from the incident had been reviewed, and it clearly showed Barnes's unwarranted aggression and prejudiced comments. The evidence was undeniable, and the department faced mounting pressure to take decisive action. Lieutenant Harris reached out to Maya and Ahmed, requesting a meeting to discuss the findings. The meeting was held in a neutral location, a conference room in a local community center, and was attended by several senior officers as well as representatives from the city's Human Rights Commission. Harris began the meeting with an apology. "Mr. Ahmed, on behalf of the police department, I want to express my deepest regret for what you experienced. Officer Barnes's actions were unacceptable, and I assure you that we are taking this matter very seriously." Ahmed listened, his expression calm but guarded. "What steps are you taking to ensure this doesn't happen again?" he asked. Harris outlined a series of measures, including mandatory bias training for all officers, increased oversight, and the establishment of a community advisory board to address concerns and improve relations between the police and the public. "While these are important steps," Harris continued, "we know they're just the beginning. We're committed to making meaningful changes, and we welcome your input on how we can do better." Maya nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It's a start," she said. "But actions speak louder than words. We'll be watching to make sure these promises are kept." Harris met her gaze, a hint of respect in his eyes. "I wouldn't expect anything less." As the investigation concluded, Officer Barnes faced disciplinary action. The department announced that he would be terminated for his misconduct, a decision that was met with widespread approval. For Ahmed, it was a bittersweet moment. While he was relieved that Barnes would no longer have the power to harm others, he knew that the fight for justice was far from over. Maya encouraged Ahmed to use the experience as a springboard for continued advocacy. "You've already made such an impact," she said. "Imagine what more you can do if you keep going." Ahmed hesitated, the weight of the responsibility heavy on his shoulders. "I'm just one person," he said. "What difference can I really make?" Maya smiled, her eyes filled with conviction. "Sometimes, one person is all it takes to start a movement. Look at everything you've accomplished already. You've inspired people, you've raised awareness, and you've helped bring about real change. That's no small thing." In the months that followed, Ahmed embraced his role as an advocate, working closely with Maya and other activists to push for broader reforms. Together, they organized workshops, speaking engagements, and community events aimed at educating the public and building bridges between communities. The impact was undeniable. The city implemented new policies to address racial profiling, and other municipalities began to take notice, adopting similar measures. Ahmed's story became a symbol of resilience and the power of collective action, inspiring others to speak out and demand justice. One evening, as Ahmed and Maya stood on the steps of City Hall after a successful rally, Ahmed turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever get tired?" he asked. "Of fighting, of pushing for change?" Maya smiled, her gaze fixed on the crowd dispersing below. "Of course," she said. "But then I think about people like you, people who are willing to stand up and make a difference. That's what keeps me going." Ahmed nodded, a sense of gratitude washing over him. "Thank you," he said. "For everything." Maya placed a hand on his shoulder, her smile widening. "Thank you, Ahmed. This is just the beginning. Here's the next 1,500-word segment of the story." As the weeks turned into months, Ahmed began to settle into his new role as an advocate for justice and equality. What had initially been a painful and humiliating experience was now the foundation for a broader movement, one that sought to challenge systemic injustices and create a better future for everyone in his community. The ripple effects of Ahmed's story were impossible to ignore. Local schools invited him to speak about his experiences, emphasizing the importance of resilience and standing up against discrimination. Community leaders began to see him as a key figure in the fight for change, and his once private life became increasingly public. Though it was a difficult adjustment, Ahmed found purpose in his newfound platform. One afternoon, as he prepared for a speaking engagement at a local college, Ahmed received a call from Maya. Her voice was filled with excitement as she shared some news. "Ahmed, you're not going to believe this," she said. "A national civil rights organization just reached out. They've heard your story and they want to honor you at their annual gala." Ahmed was stunned. "Me? But I'm just one person. I didn't do anything extraordinary." Maya chuckled. "That's where you're wrong. What you did, standing up, speaking out, and inspiring others to join you, that's extraordinary. They want to recognize the impact you've made and you deserve it." Though the idea of attending a formal gala was daunting, Ahmed couldn't deny the sense of pride that bubbled up inside him. It was a reminder that his efforts were making a real difference, not just in his city but across the country. The gala was held in a grand ballroom, its high ceilings adorned with glittering chandeliers and elegant decor. Ahmed felt a mix of nerves and excitement as he entered the room, flanked by Maya and a few other local advocates who had become like family to him. The evening was a celebration of resilience and progress, with speakers sharing stories of triumph over adversity and performers showcasing the rich cultural heritage of their communities. When it was Ahmed's turn to take the stage, he felt a wave of emotion wash over him. As he stood before the crowd, he took a deep breath and began to speak. "A year ago, I never could have imagined being here," he said. "I was just an ordinary person going about my day when one moment changed everything. What happened to me was painful, but it also opened my eyes to the power of speaking out and standing together." He paused, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "This honor isn't just for me. It's for everyone who has ever faced injustice, for everyone who has ever been made to feel like they don't belong. Together we can create a world where no one has to go through that. And that's a fight worth fighting." The audience erupted into applause, their cheers a testament to the impact Ahmed's words had made. As he stepped off the stage, Maya met him with a proud smile. "You were incredible," she said. "I hope you know how many people you've inspired tonight." Ahmed smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "It's all because of you," he said. "You showed me what was possible." Maya shook her head. "No, Ahmed. You had it in you all along. I just helped you find it." Back in their city, the work continued. Maya and Ahmed collaborated on a series of initiatives aimed at addressing the root causes of discrimination and inequality. They worked with local schools to develop anti-bias curricula, partnered with businesses to promote diversity and inclusion, and advocated for policy changes at the city and state levels. One of their most ambitious projects was the creation of a community resource center, a space where people could access legal support, mental health services, and educational programs. The center quickly became a lifeline for many, offering hope and support to those who had long felt overlooked. Ahmed spent countless hours at the center, connecting with visitors and sharing his story. He listened to their struggles, offered words of encouragement, and reminded them that they were not alone. One day, as he was leaving the center, he was approached by a young man who looked to be in his early 20s. The man hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Are you Ahmed?" he asked, his voice quiet. "Yes," Ahmed said, his tone warm and inviting. "How can I help you?" The man shifted nervously, his hands fidgeting at his sides. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said finally. "Your story, it gave me the courage to come out here and ask for help. I've been struggling for a long time and I didn't think anyone would understand. But hearing what you went through, it made me feel like maybe there's hope for me too." Ahmed felt a lump rise in his throat. "Thank you for sharing that," he said. "It means more to me than I can say. And I want you to know that you're not alone. Whatever you're going through, we're here for you." The man nodded, a faint smile breaking through his nervous expression. "I appreciate that. I really do." As the man walked away, Ahmed felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Moments like these reminded him why he had chosen to speak out, even when it had been difficult. His pain had become a source of strength, and he was using it to help others find their own. Meanwhile, the city continued to grapple with the fallout from the incident with Officer Barnes. The police department's new policies were a step in the right direction, but there was still much work to be done. Ahmed and Maya remained vigilant, holding the department accountable and pushing for further reforms. Their efforts didn't go unnoticed. City officials began to recognize the importance of their work, and several reached out to collaborate on initiatives aimed at building trust between law enforcement and the community. Though progress was slow, it was steady, and Ahmed took comfort in knowing that change was happening. One evening, as Ahmed and Maya sat in a quiet cafe, reflecting on everything they had accomplished, Maya turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Ahmed, have you ever thought about running for office?" she asked. Ahmed blinked, caught off guard. "Me? No way. I'm not a politician." Maya smiled. "You don't have to be a politician to make a difference. You already have the support of the community, and you've shown that you're a strong, compassionate leader. Why not take it to the next level?" Ahmed hesitated, the idea both intimidating and intriguing. "I wouldn't even know where to start," he admitted. "I'll help you," Maya said. "Think about it. You've already accomplished so much. Imagine what more you could do with a platform like that." Though the thought was daunting, Ahmed couldn't deny the possibility. He had come so far from the man who had been stopped and humiliated on the street, and the idea of using his voice to enact even greater change was tempting. As the year drew to a close, Ahmed reflected on his journey. What had started as a single painful moment had transformed into a movement, one that had brought people together and sparked meaningful change. He had discovered a strength within himself that he never knew existed, and he had found a purpose that gave his life new meaning. Standing on the steps of the Community Resource Center, watching as people filed in and out, Ahmed felt a sense of peace. The road ahead was still long and the fight for justice was far from over, but he knew that he wasn't alone. Together with Maya and the countless others who had joined their cause, he was building a future where everyone could feel safe, valued, and respected. And as he looked out at the faces of the people he had come to know and care for, Ahmed felt a quiet certainty in his heart. This was only the beginning. Months later, the city was almost unrecognizable in terms of its community spirit and commitment to justice. What had begun with Ahmed's painful encounter with Officer Barnes had blossomed into a city-wide movement. Conversations that once felt uncomfortable were now taking place openly in schools, workplaces, and even in City Hall. People were not only acknowledging systemic issues but also actively working to address them. The Community Resource Center, Ahmed and Maya's most ambitious project, was thriving. It had become a safe haven for people from all walks of life, a place where they could seek guidance, share their stories, and find the support they needed. The walls of the center were decorated with murals painted by local artists, each one representing themes of unity, resilience, and hope. For Ahmed, it was a visual reminder of what could be achieved when people came together. One day, while Ahmed was reviewing plans for an upcoming community workshop, Maya entered his office with a wide grin on her face. She held up a small stack of envelopes, each bearing an official seal. "You're not going to believe this," she said, placing the envelopes on his desk. "What is it?" Ahmed asked, curious. "These," Maya said, tapping the top envelope, "are invitations. The mayor's office, the governor's office, and even a federal agency have all invited you to speak at upcoming events. They want to hear from you, Ahmed." Ahmed stared at the envelopes, a mix of surprise and humility washing over him. "Me? I'm just one person. Why would they want to hear from me?" Maya rolled her eyes playfully. "You've got to stop saying that. You're not just one person. You're a leader, a symbol of what's possible when someone has the courage to stand up for what's right. These invitations are proof of that." Ahmed picked up one of the envelopes, running his fingers over the seal. The idea of speaking to such influential audiences was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. But as he thought about the journey that had brought him to this point, he knew he couldn't let fear hold him back. "All right," he said finally. "Let's do it." The first event was a state conference on justice and equality, attended by lawmakers, community leaders, and activists from across the region. Ahmed took the stage with Maya by his side, her presence a steadying force as he faced the large audience. As he began to speak, Ahmed felt the familiar mix of nerves and determination. He shared his story with honesty and vulnerability, recounting the moment he had been stopped by Officer Barnes and the humiliation he had felt. But he also spoke about the hope and strength he had found in the aftermath, the community that had rallied around him, the changes that had been made, and the belief that together they could achieve even more. "We all have a role to play," Ahmed said, his voice steady and full of conviction. "Change doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen because of one person. It happens when we come together, when we refuse to accept the status quo, and when we fight for a future where everyone is treated with dignity and respect." The audience gave him a standing ovation, their applause a testament to the impact of his words. As Ahmed stepped off the stage, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. He wasn't just sharing his story, he was helping to write a new chapter for his community and beyond. Back in the city, the ripple effects of Ahmed's advocacy continued to grow. The police department, under pressure from both the public and city officials, implemented additional reforms. These included the creation of an independent oversight board, increased transparency, and community-based policing initiatives. While there was still work to be done, the changes were a step in the right direction. One evening, Ahmed received a call from Lieutenant Harris, who had become a surprising ally in the months since the incident with Barnes. Harris invited Ahmed and Maya to a meeting at the police department to discuss the progress that had been made and to gather feedback on what more could be done. During the meeting, Harris shared updates on the department's efforts, including data showing a significant decrease in complaints of racial profiling and an increase in positive community interactions. "We still have a long way to go," Harris admitted. "But I want you both to know that your work has made a real difference. It's changed the way we approach our job, and it's changed the way we think about our relationship with the community." Ahmed nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's good to see progress," he said. "But we can't stop now. The trust that's been broken will take time to rebuild, and it's going to take consistent effort from all of us." Maya added, "We also need to make sure that these changes are sustainable. That means institutionalizing them so they don't depend on any one person or administration." Harris agreed, taking notes as they spoke. The meeting ended on a positive note, with all parties committed to continuing their collaboration. As the one-year anniversary of the incident with Barnes approached, Maya and Ahmed decided to organize a community celebration to mark the progress that had been made. The event, held at the Resource Center, featured speeches, performances, and activities for people of all ages. The highlight of the evening was a mural unveiling, created by a team of local artists with input from community members. The mural depicted a powerful scene, a diverse group of people standing together, their hands linked, with the words "strength and unity" emblazoned above them. Ahmed stood before the crowd, his heart full as he looked out at the sea of faces. He saw families, activists, police officers, and city officials, all gathered together in a spirit of hope and solidarity. "When I think about everything that's happened over the past year," Ahmed began, his voice steady and full of emotion, "I'm reminded of a simple truth: we are stronger together. What started as one painful moment has become a movement, and that's because of all of you. Your courage, your support, and your belief in the possibility of change have made this moment possible." He paused, scanning the crowd. "But this is just the beginning. There's still so much work to be done, and we need each and every one of you to keep pushing, keep speaking out, and keep standing together. Because when we do, there's nothing we can't achieve." The crowd erupted into cheers, their applause echoing through the night. As Ahmed stepped down from the stage, Maya met him with a proud smile. "You've come a long way," she said. "And you're just getting started?" Ahmed nodded, a sense of peace and determination settling over him. "Thanks to you," he said. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Maya placed a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe not," she said. "But now it's your turn to lead. And I have no doubt you'll do amazing things." In the months and years that followed, Ahmed continued to build on the foundation he had created. He became a respected advocate not just in his city but on a national scale, working to address systemic injustices and create a more inclusive society. His story inspired countless others to speak out, and his efforts left a lasting impact on the communities he served. Through it all, Ahmed remained grounded, never forgetting the moment that had set him on this path. What had once been a source of pain and humiliation had become a catalyst for change. A reminder that even in the face of adversity, there is always the possibility of hope and resilience. And as he stood in the bustling halls of the Resource Center, watching people connect, learn, and grow, Ahmed knew that he had found his purpose. Together they were building a future worth fighting for. And together they were proving that strength truly lies in unity.